Hello again. Let's turn our attention now to the Middle East. The US Secretary of State is heading to Saudi Arabia this week for another round of talks aimed at securing a ceasefire in Gaza and, of course, the release of Israeli hostages. Qatar, which has been mediating between Israel and Hamas, has urged both sides to show more commitment and more seriousness. Well, I'm joined now by Laura Blumenfeld, former senior policy advisor to the US State Department's Israel-Palestinian negotiating team. Great to have you with us as always. Antony Blinken, of course, has been to the region many times in recent months. How significant do you think this trip is?
Well put. I mean, this is Secretary Blinken's big deal trip. I mean, there's a lot at stake, and I think we're going to see 48 hours of high drama. In Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, he's going to be talking diplomatic talk, but then he's moving on to Tel Aviv, where you're going to see him really walking emotional walk, where he has the opportunity to show both to the Israelis and the Palestinians he understands where they're coming from and how hard this is. He'll be the first senior U.S. official to go to the border with Gaza and to see those towns that were ravaged on October 7th by Hamas, to visit the kibbutzes. And he's also going to go to a border crossing where they're, working desperately to get more humanitarian aid and to say, I hear you, I see you.
And when it comes to the ceasefire negotiations, what are the sticking points?
Well, all of them, basically. Fundamentally, the Israelis don't feel like they've got the job done, and Hamas is ready to call it quits. They are looking for, Hamas is asking for a permanent cessation to hostilities. Recently, the Israelis are showing some flexibility. They're able to call it something like an extended calm. I think for the Israelis, once you bring the hostages out of those tunnels, then they'll be able to consider things like, beyond the horizon, an end game for Gaza. But until you're holding them, there's very, very little room for compromise. For Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, it gets personal as well as political, because his hard right coalition partners are threatening to pull if they don't go all the way into Rafah to finish that military job.
Yeah, that threat of Rafah still hanging over the region, but there is some suggestion that maybe the Israelis could hold off if hostages were to be released. Is that your understanding then?
Yeah, look, their time is running out. Some people think that Netanyahu is using the threat of a Rafah invasion just as a bargaining chip. The hostages are clearly getting weaker. A bunch of Israeli holidays are on the horizon, including the Independence Day, which is in 2 weeks, Holocaust Memorial Day, which is in a week. These are all emotional pressure points for the Israeli population. In the U.S., we've got domestic politics with the election, and everywhere President Biden goes, there's pressure on him, from campuses all the way to campaign stops. And then finally, domestically in the region, the moderate Arab states who've been all along the swing states to bring this to a peaceful resolution are feeling more and more pressure from their population to find a way forward.
Yeah, I mean, we have been seeing in the last couple of hours, White House National Security spokesman John Kirby has been saying that Israel has agreed to listen to US concerns before it launches that Rafah operation. What are your thoughts on that?
It's very interesting. What they've provided, what spokesman Kirby talks about, is a conditions-based invasion of Rafah. And the conditions basically are such that it's nearly impossible for the Israelis to meet them. How you move that population of over 1 million civilians to safety so the Israelis can finish the job. What the Israelis are trying to do is kind of have it both ways, and it's kind of, some of it is about language. When they talk about their operations now in Gaza, they talk about targeted and strategic pinpoint operations, so they can keep the Americans on board, but they can also keep the hardliners who are saying, look, Saudi Arabia, they're not going to want to be our partners in any kind of military alliance against Iran or anybody else if we give the appearance of being weak. So strength really speaks in the Middle East, and the Israelis are trying to kind of please the West while appease the East.
Of course. And Laura, while we've been speaking in the last couple of minutes, I see that Reuters are reporting that President Biden plans to speak to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu later on today. How are relations between the pair?
I think there's kind of a high decibel diplomacy between them. When I think what Biden learned this year is that when you yell, Netanyahu hears you. But if you say it kind of, speak softly and carry a big aircraft carrier, that might not always get the message through. But in that phone call, several weeks ago, following the tragic death of the World Central Kitchen workers, The message came through loud and clear. You know, the era of unconditional love and weapons is over between us, and you need to listen to me if you want us to continue supporting you.
And just tell me about the wider implications for the region, the World Economic Forum, of course, taking place as we speak.
Well, it's very interesting. We can't forget the context where all this is happening, right? The World Economic Forum is about progress and economics, which at the end of the day can speak stronger in sometimes than weapons. You know, as we've seen with the moderate Arab states, blood was not necessarily thicker than liquidity when it came to deciding where to put their leadership and their votes. The U.S. is countering China. That's one of our most important national security issues and priorities. And Saudi Arabia wants to be a superpower in the AI era, which puts us in contention with China, where we're trying to have our technological influence outweigh theirs, especially in important arenas like Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and just finally, briefly, if you can, looking ahead to when this might all be over, this conflict, what are your predictions?
I don't think we're there yet. I think I think watch the clock on the next 48 hours. You know, Secretary Blinken is going to be meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu on Wednesday morning. He's presenting this big deal, this tripartite deal where normalization with Saudi Arabia in exchange for Israel, at least recognizing in some way a pathway toward a Palestinian state, and then a U.S. security alliance between the United States and Saudi Arabia. The problem is that Israel right now is much more motivated by Iran rather than normalization with Saudi Arabia. If the United States can present this rather than as a choice of Rafah versus Riyadh, but Rafah versus Raisi, the president of Iran, and say, look, you can be part of a coalition of coexistence together with the moderate Arab states and European partners against Iran. Make it more about sticks to hit Iran than carrots from Saudi Arabia, and you have a chance to win with the Israelis.
Yeah, so many moving parts. We'll see where these latest talks take us. As always, Laura Blumenfeld, thank you.
Thank you.